Good evening, citizens of Portsmouth, invited guests, my colleagues on council. I want to welcome you to our public work session for February 27th. And I would ask my colleagues to please note your presence electronically.
5 members of City Council are present.
Thank you, ma'am. And now I will turn the meeting over to our interim city manager, Ms. Mimi Terry. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and Portsmouth family. Today, we're going to start with our discussion on personal property tax with our own Commissioner of Revenue, Mr. Frankie Edmondson.
Mr. Edmondson, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council, Madam City Manager, my fellow citizens all. As you've heard, my name is Frankie Edmondson. It's my honor, indeed my privilege, to serve as your Commissioner of the Revenue here in Portsmouth. And we're going to have a brief discussion tonight regarding personal property tax. Coming up, you've got some decisions to make budgetary-wise coming up in the spring. And so, excuse me, in the interest of time, what I have here for you is you should have a packet from us. I think some of the individuals in the audience have gotten the same packet. I'll read a brief statement and then we'll go through each line item. As I begin, I want to thank the city manager, the city attorney, and the city clerk and their staffs for all their hard work and dedication to help us get this presentation put together to you tonight. So can we give them a round of applause, please? Greetings. The purpose of this memorandum is to draw your attention to the fundamental concepts and principles of the updated CY24 data details as that relate to the efforts to fairly and equitably assess our personal property accounts for this calendar year. We trust that you will find this information helpful as you discuss and deliberate the FY25 city budget moving forward. It is my honor and indeed my privilege to serve as your Commissioner of Revenue, and if I can be of further assistance concerning same, please feel free to call upon me. Thank you for your continued service to our community. By copy of this correspondence, I would also like to thank my dedicated deputies and staff members who continue to show great professionalism and commitment on behalf of our citizens as we work together to generate some of the much-needed revenues that help to fund the city budget that you will consider this spring. We wish you well with this process to enhance the quality of life that we all enjoy. And we have several components here. A will be a history of the Personal Property Tax Relief Act. And then B, we'll give you some comparisons on personal property tax relief for 2024. C will be sampling of some of our recent billings. D will give you a median, mean, and range. And then E obviously will be a discussion on how we go through the process and some changes that we've seen for 2024. I'll try to be courtesy of your time and move forward. If you have questions, please stop me, or if we get to a point you'd like to have further clarification, we'll do that at that time. Mr. Mayor? Okay.
Please proceed.
A. Most of you know, and a lot of our citizens know, we're engaged in a history of public policy. I suppose I can use this clicker, right? This will take us to the next slide. Rather than read the document, I'd just like to go through these particular slides. So there we go, advance at one. If you notice, this is the history of personal property, and it kind of gives you the details. If you don't already have that information, it'll tell you when it started, 1998, and then we realized some numbers back in 2005, and I would like to let you know that those numbers really haven't changed over the past 19 years. So we get it right around $9.3 to $9.8 million from the state. We'd like to use those initially up front prior to using city funds for any offset. So we're going to recommend to you, excuse me, customary personal property tax relief number percentage in hopes that you'll consider that in your budget deliberations moving forward. If we move to the next slide, please. These are some comparisons for what we've done in the past, all the way from 2006 to 2023. So that's your historical data of the percentage of PPTRA that you and I, working with you, we've suggested. You've concurred with that through the years. And we started out with 50%. Most of you know there was a governor who ran for office, said he was going to do 100%. Unfortunately, we never realized 100%. We did reach a high as 62% back in 2011, and we haven't reached, we have yet to, that's the highest we've gotten with regards to this program to date. You'll notice that you'll be seeing some information subsequently to your budget discussions. We're going to be recommending, working with the manager and her budget team, we're going to be recommending a 50% personal property tax relief again this year. We think that will utilize the revenue that comes from this, resources that come from this state, and then we'll see the offset going forward. Next slide, please. Personal property tax assessments for 2023. This will give you a sampling of some of the things that, if you look on, this will be in section B, if you're looking at following the outline on the memorandum, and you'll see personal property for 2024, and it'll kind of give you some ideas as to where we see some of these. We are seeing some of them, the values decrease with regards to these designators. In our office and pursuant to our computer programs, we use Designator 1, automobiles, Designator 2, pickup trucks, Designator 3, SUVs, and vans and so forth, and then Designator 5, motorcycles. So those are that's the information that we use with regards to that, and it'll give you a breakdown based on less than 10,000 all the way up to greater than 60,000, and that's all pertinent to those information in that category. Next slide, please. This is a regional perspective of what we've been able to ascertain up to this point. We did see from calendar year last year, because assessments are all done on a calendar year basis. I know that your deliberations will include a financial year, or fiscal year rather. And so from a FY 2025 standpoint, but the calendar year is what we use for assessment purposes. This is a reflection of what our counterparts across Hampton Roads used last year and any information that we were able to obtain to date. We are early in the process, and so other localities will be doing likewise, just like we're doing. They'll be considering the same type of thing. As soon as we have that information, we'll be providing to the manager and hopefully along to the council for your consideration moving forward. We did include our recommendation as a 50%, so you'll see that out of the box. And the only other one, the highest one we got, was City of Chesapeake, looks like 41% to date. And then the County of Acromack, rather, hadn't been approved, but they're recommending 31%. And Virginia Beach is looking at a 44.60%. Isle of Wight County, 30%. Okay, next slide, please. NADA vehicle value comparison. So last time we were here, we had a discussion about if my car was in the driveway, what is it worth today? And we have seen some increases. We've seen some decreases. Across the board, you were seeing somewhere between a 6 and a 7% decrease. So I'll call your attention to item number, letter C. It says for a sampling of our recent billing, the early assessments values for CY24 and total assessed values for CY23 seem to indicate a 6% to 7% decrease year over year, respectively. That'll go back to some questions we had, and I think it may have been Dr. Whitaker and some others were concerned about, and I know Councilman Hugel, with regards to if I had a vehicle in my car, in my driveway, what am I getting? Well, we saw some effects of COVID. You remember in the past we employed the offset was the multiplier where we had the ratio study. We have to use 100%, and we came back to reward some of our taxpayers, or I shouldn't say reward, but give them the tax relief that they needed at that time. We're starting to see that recovery, You will remember that's the conversation that we had about we need to take this action at this time, and now we're seeing the numbers come back up, or come back to a normal status of where they were. This slide is a sampling of that, and hopefully you'll see we've given you the benefit of those indicators with regards to whether they're 1 designator, 2 designator, 3 or 4, and or 5, which would be motorcycles. So we've included a sampling of that for what our current billing is. Next slide, please. We did get into the discussion of with Councilman Moody in the past, was curious about our median, and so we did the median, the mean, and the range from an assessment value. Thank you. From an assessment value, sometimes that's very, very important, but as you went, and I know you hear from the one, it's my tax, it's not the average or what everything else. So people calling you about their tax return from our standpoint, so they're looking at their personal one, but for your consideration, excuse me. Wanted to share this information with you. So the median is 32,770. The mean would be 1,080, and then the total range between the highest amount value and the lowest amount, $134,615. And that information came from Information Technologies. Next slide, please. Personal property tax. Obviously, this is the code section that we look at to determine what our responsibilities are and obviously what our requirements are, and this is what guides us with regards to our work in this area. Excuse me, next slide, please. And then this talks about uniform methodology assessment. You'll see these 5 components will give you the indication as to what we use, have used in the past, and where we're headed pursuant to Virginia Code and is pursuant to city ordinances regarding same. So those numbers will give us the methodology that we use to then value the vehicles to go through the processes. One caveat, I will tell you there's been a change in the business. If you'll look at E, I won't read it all, but we did have to, because we do not have a standalone application performing interface, a API. We had to go through a third-party vendor, which did increase. NADA was purchased by J.D. Powers. J.D. Powers changed some business practices of what they were doing. We used to get all our data directly from them. You have a slide that shows you the state code says we have to use a pricing guide. Most localities, if not all, use NADA, or now it's owned by J.D. Powers. They've changed their business model, so now we're using a third-party vendor for our initial billing, and then we still have a relationship with J.D. Powers for the remaining portion of the supplemental bills. So basically, that did increase some, and budget will be offset to reflect that. But we have to use it. We did across the board a search with every locality in the state to try to determine what was the best approach, and then we went out for bid, used the purchasing department, and got this Affinity, which is a Virginia-based product, and they've been able to help us. They were awarded the bid. We used them in our initial bid. The numbers you're seeing tonight were some of the numbers that they help us generate regarding our personal property tax numbers. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has, and move on with your agenda for tonight. I know you're very busy.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. And our first question is from Councilman Moody. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Commissioner. On page C, I noticed EVs. That's a tremendous drop of, I think, 19,100, which roughly probably a little over 43%
Yes, sir.
reduction in value. Is that a correct figure?
We're going to look at that again. I mean, that's something we saw initially. That's what the numbers are indicating to date. I'm not sure why that is. I know at one point in time they weren't available. A lot of these numbers are predicated on what, the availability of
Right.
these things. And so I don't have a definition for that yet, but that's another thing we can look into. We do believe these numbers are correct, but that doesn't mean it's going to hold that. But we have a January 1st timeline of when this assessment is due, so.
Right. And how many localities are using Affinity versus,
I'm not sure. I'll tell you what our challenge was. We use them, but they also have other localities who use them for other applications. Our fear was that because we don't have this interface ourselves, that we'd be caught out there with not having an opportunity. So we went through procurement, went through that process, and I don't know exactly how many in the state you think, 20? Yeah, we're still using J.D. Power information. It's just we couldn't receive it from J.D. Power in the current format. You have to have a interface that will allow for that to come into our database.
yeah,
What they do is help us receive the information. It's not their information, it's our information. It's just helping us get it and use it in our computer network in the city.
but they establish the value of each vehicle.
J.D. Powers is still the J.D.
Yeah.
Powers. It's still NADA J.D. Power information.
Yeah.
We just use Affinity as
Right.
a processor interface.
And also, at 50%, what would a 40% tabulate as far as deduction in tax revenue?
Well, the easiest answer is that I think you'll see that in your budget presentation. But the 50%, 40% rather, is probably not going to meet the state mandate of using those state dollars that offset that tax return. That tax relief rather. So you can go down on PPTRA, but you got to spend that 9.3, I think it is, $1 million that you get on an annual basis. So that's why we've hovered around that, because you can't from year to year. You don't want to take state dollars that aren't being used for something. We're using it for a benefit throughout. We can do the calculation on the 40%, but this is comparable to what the budget. So we can go back to the drawing board with the budget team. This
Yeah.
complements what their presentations are going to be to you moving forward.
I think I would like to see what each percentage of decrease in that represents, because this is the most onerous tax there is. And you buy a car, you pay sales tax on it, then for the life of that vehicle, it's taxed. I probably hear more complaints about that tax than any other.
I'm with you. I
Probably
get that. I
even
get that.
exceeding real estate tax.
Right. Right.
So, and as you know, it's this council that decides at the end of the day what the rate's going to be. But I think the more information that we have on that, the more we can look and see.
But if you give a 40%, it's going to be less of a benefit to the taxpayer.
Well, I'm talking about a reduction in the tax itself.
Right. So you're saying like if you
Yeah,
gave a 60% versus
60,
a,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be more than happy to work with the manager and the budget team to bring that information back to you.
But I think we need to see a range of what each percentage of reduction in that represents.
Right. The challenge, if you go,
Based on your median price here, value of an automobile or vehicle.
right. We try to be very mindful of that, recognizing that we got to only spend that, what we get, the allotment that we're going to get. And so we can do more, then we'll have to offset that from some other part of the budget. Or I should say this.
I realize
you can
that.
do more, yeah. I
I
know.
realize that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Edmondson, thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate your brief.
Thank you.
So on the regional comparison slide, kind of back to Councilman Moody's question, I think I asked this last year, but I just want to confirm, a higher relief number is better.
Yes, sir.
That means we're all paying less percentage of the tax rate. So we have the highest relief of any city in the area.
To date,
according
right?
to this picture.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's a
So I wanna
snapshot in time.
Yep, got that, but I want to make that point because
That's right.
we talk about where we're not so good in taxes compared to the region. In this case, we're doing better than most.
Councilman Hugo, just as a point,
Yeah.
because so they're using data that they collected in 2004. So 20-year-old data,
Yeah.
it hadn't been changed in 20 years, and we're still using that figure that we've been receiving since 2026 forward. and that's the amount that we're trying to match.
Yeah.
So yes, if we give a greater increase, reduction, or if we go 60% or 70% or whatever percent the council chooses, that would be a larger benefit to the taxpayer. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So what is the personal property tax rate?
It's $5 per 100.
And is that set by the state? I mean, so
That's set
every...
by council.
Okay, so do we know what the tax rate is, personal property tax rate is in all these other places?
We
Because we're
do.
giving more relief, but if we're charging more tax, then of course we ought to be giving more relief.
We have that data. I don't have it in front of me now, but I could make it available to you
Okay.
as far as what the tax rate would be. I will say we are probably one of the highest in the Commonwealth at this time.
Okay, so I'd like to see that data, because kind of back to, we can give relief, that's one way to get there, but another way to get there is to tackle
Change the
the rate. Okay, and the $5 per 100, is that the same rate as is in effect now?
Yes, sir.
So next year, same as
It's
this
been
year?
the same for 19 years.
19 years, so-
since I've been here.
Got it. Okay, thank you, appreciate the information, and I appreciate your follow-up.
Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Edmondson, for the presentation. My question is on, I guess, page E, the assessment methodology. And the city of Portsmouth is experiencing a 6% to 7% decrease in the vehicle assessment for the calendar year. So do we want that number to go up or down to make it more beneficial?
That number will tell you, Mr. Mayor, that number will tell you the average value. And like Councilman Hugo's talking about the rate, we take the value is maybe 6 to 7% decreased or levelizing out. As you remember, automobiles weren't available through COVID, so the price demand was higher, supply and demand type of thing, that we've had this dialogue through the last 3 years with regards to that. And so in Portsmouth, we see a larger number of individuals holding on to their older vehicles. And so that's why we're able to kind of give you a pre-guess in some respects, because we don't see the turnover, if you will. You don't see a lot of vehicles, leaving the city, coming back, traversing through the city. We see a lot of the same vehicles. And so we're able to maintain that. Sometimes that's good because you're able to at least project and see what that is. The other side of it is, obviously, if the vehicle, let's say, corrects itself, the value corrects itself, then that's what we're going to see through these numbers. That's what they suggest. And I would let you know, obviously remind you, these are not commercial or business vehicles, only personal vehicles for residential, residents.
Okay, and then I guess my last question, I guess the Blue Book value is what everybody knows their vehicle
That's
to
what-
be assessed on. Is there any way, if someone doesn't agree with what has been presented, any kind of way for them to appeal or go, have it changed?
Yes, ma'am. Two quick things. One, they can appeal any day and not between 8 and 5 or by appointment. So if they call us, if someone can't make those hours, we'll come to them. They can come here to City Hall. We'll meet them. And we do have a date scheduled on a Saturday for someone to come to do the appeal. We started out, there were several around the region and in the state. And to my knowledge, we're the last one in the Commonwealth that's still doing an on-site on a Saturday to allow that. But I do think, like you're saying, if someone wants to come and they want to appeal their assessment, we should at least explain to them how we arrived at that.
Right.
And that, we work for them, as you well know. They're our bosses, if you will. They're the shareholders of the company, so to speak, this enterprise that we call a city. So I'm happy to talk to them anytime, whenever it's convenient for them. But we do have personnel on City Hall, site every day to do that function. And then the date for this year's is going to be Saturday, May 18th. And I believe we secured the location, but that'll be coming in their bill.
Right.
And then they'll get that information subsequently, working with the marketing department and others to make sure people know about that. And we're happy to stay, until we get them done.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Evans, thank you for the
Yes, sir.
presentation. Just to make sure I'm clear, the the 9.3 million, that represents the personal property tax relief that comes from the state. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that's the equivalent to your office doing the 50% reduction. That covers that 9.3 million.
That's been our experience to
Right.
date. So the issue is obviously if we got more relief from the state, we could
Right.
offer more. Or
Right.
if you decided to offset that, similar to what you've determined either through a rate reduction or more relief, yes, sir.
Right.
That would give some equilibrium more balance
Right.
to where we're headed.
Right, so as it stands now, this doesn't change the rate, it just gives a credit in
Yes, sir.
essence to the city, like we do for the real estate tax, is that?
Madam Interim City Manager, you wanted to make a comment? Go ahead, ma'am, you have the floor.
I just want to make sure what you said, that, because I know, I want to make sure he understood your question. So the 9.3 million doesn't cover 50% to the max. Remember last year, we decided to do 50%. 9.3 covers some of that, and then we, as the city, supplements the balance
balance.
for that, because it may be 13 or 14 million dollars for the relief at 50%. So the 9.3 is the start, and the city would then assume the rest and
Okay.
supplement the rest for that.
So do we have any idea about how much more the city may be having to supplement?
So where we start now is just the commissioner providing the presentation. We propose it at 50% so we could get our budget done. And then I come back to council and show you what categories actually receive the most relief, because they have to still do a portion. So we'll know how much the cars are, what is the true assessment, which one received the relief, and I give you options. So this is what it's gonna cost at 50%, this is what it's gonna cost at 48%, and this is what it costs at 52, so that you all can truly see what the city would have to supplement beyond the 9.3 million.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's right. And I think that's why we discussed, at the beginning, we said this is part of the discussion, because I do know that your decisions were made in the past were greater than the 9.3%. The state have never increased that to, since the exception of the program, so.
Councilman Moody, sir, you have the floor. You on my list, sir, that's why I called you, I'm sorry.
Mr. Edmondson,
Yes, sir.
isn't there a high mileage adjustment that citizens can get for those?
Yes, sir.
who
There's a high
drive?
mileage adjustment that is prescribed by NADA, J.D. Powers, nationally recognized. But if their vehicle is over 10 years old, then their theory is that's built into that. So if we can give a high mileage adjustment, we will predicate it on that, and if not, we may have to look for something else.
Okay.
There are other factors that might give someone a, but yes, the most common would be high mileage.
How would they get that?
They either come here and, come down to City Hall when they're traversing the city, come by here. They'll be on May the 18th. We'll have something locally where they could drive through, or they can call our office and we'll set an appointment. In most cases, a lot of cases, we'll come to them if they can't make it to City Hall, or if their schedule doesn't allow between 8 and 5, then we'll make whatever necessary arrangements to try to go to them.
And what kind of proof do they need to bring in?
Obviously, we look at it ourselves. We have a checklist, and they'll do an appeal. What we do is mass appraisal, so they'll have to sign a document that'll take them out of the mass appraisal review. And obviously, if it's been wrecked or damaged, it doesn't operate, those types of things will factor in, and then we'll take it under consideration at that time. So it's a process. It's a formal appeal, and then it's noted in their system in case other taxpayers have a question, then we can show where it would offset it. Like if someone had a high mileage. Sure. Business vehicles do not qualify. So in other words, if someone used it for the performance of their business, obviously that wouldn't, because they're getting it, theory is they're getting it off on their IRS filings.
Thanks.
Yep. I'm sorry.
All right, Ms. Terry.
Do you, and you may have already said it in so many ways, did you want to talk about your Saturday, how your staff comes out?
Oh, Sure, I'll be more than happy to. Well, it's scheduled for May 18th, and we'll have a staff here. In the past, the most recent one has been in this building. It's not always most conducive. There are other locations around the city, but the information will be in the tax bill when we submit the book, and then the treasurer will send out the statements. Those statements will be due on June the 5th, and so between now and prior to June 5th, this year it happens to be on May 18th, we'll make ourselves available, and we'll man an office for any person that qualifies can get a review at that date. But here again, we do it every day, all day, 8 to 5. We do it by appointment, and we try to accommodate anyone that we can who wants their tax, reviewed.
Councilman Hugo, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So this might be for the city manager, but could one of you remind me, what revenue do we collect from personal property tax this year? What's the total personal property tax revenue that the city receives?
It's about 32 to 34 million.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, sir, you have the floor.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to Councilman Moody. He mentioned the high mileage. Is there a definition standard for high mileage?
Yes, sir. It's listed in the NADA booklet per vehicle.
Okay.
Because some vehicles are different, and that's a
Okay.
good point to bring out. They don't, in theory, they all are treated the same, but the reality is some manufacturers, the cars are going to outlive them or outpace them, and so it's an industry standard, and we don't set that. Obviously, we use the pricing guide for that, and then in an extreme situation, if they're not in the pricing guide, we can reach an agreed-upon price. If someone has extenuating circumstances and we can mitigate that assessment, then we try to help the taxpayer. Err on the side of helping the taxpayer, but the reality of it is, once we give that tax break, then obviously everybody else has to pay offset. So our goal is to try to be fair and equitable and prevent any type of appeal or, court action that would then take it to another level, which that's our goal. So the pricing guide does give a pretty good explanation of what qualifies. Sometimes they don't leave happy just because they don't understand that, but it's our job to at least share that information with them. Right. And then if they don't like it, obviously we can go to the next level. They always can go to the tax commissioner, or circuit court on an appeal.
Thank you.
Mr. Commissioner,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm available. Anybody has other questions after tonight, we'll be more than happy to provide the information. And I would drill down on what we talked about before.
Also, on behalf of council, we want to thank you and your staff for the work you do on behalf of our citizens.
Thank you.
You do a great job. Keep up
Thank
the great
you.
work.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Madam Manager, ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, our next presentation will be presented by our interim assessor, Mr. Stephen Edwards.
Mr. Edwards, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good
Good.
evening. Excuse me, get that up there. Good evening, Mr. Mayor Glover, Vice Mayor Lucasberg, members of council, Madam City Manager, Madam City Attorney, and Madam City Clerk. I am here to discuss the proposed assessment for the FY25 year, which is effective on July 1st. Am I going there? The briefing
Mr. Edwards, could you please speak up just a little bit more
All
into
right.
the microphone?
See if I can get this thing, that better?
Yep, just
Okay.
keep it closer to your mouth. That probably helps, sir.
All right. So basically, let me get something I can have a look around here.
Take your time, sir. I know you got a lot to do, so just take your time. We're okay.
We're good. Basically, we're going to discuss the annual reassessment, the market conditions that factored into the results, and present the estimated proposed assessments, and then provide a summary of the next steps of the process at the end. Basically, the authority given to me to do my job is from Title 58.1 of the Code of Virginia, Chapter 32 precisely, and basically, in a nutshell, my job is to maintain records on all real property within the city of Portsmouth and ensure the assessments are conducted in a fair and equitable manner. So you hear that a lot tonight. Frankie said it several times, and I will say it several times. The state code requires assessments be uniform among classes of property within geographic boundaries. And requires assessors to strive for 100% of fair market value. And then fair market value has been defined by the Supreme Court in 1958 in a case entitled Tuckahoe Women's Club versus the City of Richmond. And this has stand the test of time. It's been through many battles in court. I believe every assessor's office uses it, and most appraisers in general use it. And basically, it is the price a property will bring when it is offered for sale by one who desires but is not obligated to sell it, and bought by one who is under no necessity of having it. Basically, what that means is there's no duress. Duress means they have to sell it. They can't, the bank's coming for their money, or they lost their job and they have to get rid of it, and that's not considered a good sale because they're forced to sell it. This is, I got my house on the market, I don't really need it, I've got another one, so I'm gonna put it out there and see what happens, and if somebody comes and buys it, that's kind of an arm's length transaction. And but those are the sales we use, and the state defines what we do for sales. There's 20 categories that the state assigns that show a sale is not a good sale, and one that shows it is. So there's a lot of stringent review of sales to determine where they fall, whether it be a valid sale or an invalid sale. There's a lot of time and effort spent on sales review. The mission of our office is to appraise all real property throughout the city in a fair and equitable manner, as mandated by the Code of the State of Virginia, the Code of the City of Portsmouth, in accordance with all professional guidelines set forth by the International Association of Assessing Officers. This mission will be carried out in a courteous, efficient, and professional manner by a well-trained staff dedicated to the service of the citizens of Portsmouth. And I want to reiterate that again, dedicated to the service of the citizens of Portsmouth. Customer service is paramount in our office. That is, we want the best customer service we can have. Not everybody likes what we do, but I want them to leave saying, hey, I don't like what I was told, but they were great to deal with, and they explained everything to me. I don't want them going out and calling you guys saying that guy was not a nice person. And everybody in our office strives for the same customer service goal that I have. And again, on our day-to-day functions, customer service has been moved to number one. Originally, when this list was done, it was at the bottom, but I felt it deserves to be at number one. That's what we do. We also, on a daily basis, we inspect and collect data on all new construction properties. We review and update records on existing properties, process and validate property transfers. Again, that's the sales part where we're reviewing constantly and trying to figure out if they're good or not. We do a lot of statistical work. You would not believe the amount of statistical analysis that goes into the job. Most people think we throw darts at a dartboard. It's kind of a little more than that. We also process the splits, mergers, parcel combinations that happen throughout the city, new subdivisions. And we work interactively with other offices and departments within the city, especially planning, zoning, IT, and city manager's office. Now we're going to get into a little bit of the market data. As you can see, one of the biggest drivers of residential real estate and commercial to a point is the interest rate. 10 years ago, it was at 4.1, and it's kind of stayed steady for a while until we got into 2020, where it dropped down into the low threes, 2021, where we were sub 3. And then once we came out of the COVID and the rates started going up, you can see they've kind of gone up quite a bit now. It's at the end of 2023, it was 6.81, and I think I saw last week it was 7.25. Mm-hmm. So, but the market is still strong because there's not a lot of supply, but there's still a pretty good amount of demand out there for properties. And the next slide shows evidence of that. Is just the median days on the market for all of the residential properties in the city that sold in the calendar year 2023. As you can see, back in 2012, it was over 106 days, and it's been on a steady decline as the interest rates kind of started dropping and demand started ramping up for them. And we get all the way down to the current year, or 2023, which was 17 days. That's just outstanding. When I started appraising 29 years ago, 90 to 120 days was considered great if you could sell a property. And then the total number of transfers, and we've had year over year. It's been back 10 years ago, we were in the upper twos, low threes, and then kind of as we got into the 2015 through 2018, we started pushing close to 4. Then in 2021, when we had sub-3 interest rates, you saw over 5,100 properties transfer that year. And in 2022, the beginning of that year, there were still very low interest rates, which caused still a very strong demand and had a lot of transfers. This year, we've kind of leveled back out with where we were in the middle of the decade, back in the 2015, 2016 timeframe. And then another telling sign of a strong market is the number of foreclosures. Over a decade ago, back when we were coming out of the Great Recession, you were looking at 564, and it's been on a steady decline. 2020 shouldn't really count as there was a moratorium, so 19 is just an unrealistic number. 2021 was still under the moratorium, so we only had 33, but we can see we're back on a climb upward. We had 115 total foreclosures last year, which is still remarkable given 34,000 parcels. And then just looking at the year-over-year increase or decrease, however.
Excuse me, Mr. Edwards.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Whitaker has a question.
Oh, yes.
Sir, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Before you go into the reassessment, I just had a question on the market data. When we're looking at the graphs, of course, I know that the fixed mortgage rate, that's a national rate there. However, when we start looking at median days on market, is that specific to Portsmouth?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
That was,
All right.
yeah, that was specific to just all single-family
Yeah.
condos and townhomes just in Portsmouth.
Okay.
And that was from a service called RAIN, which
So,
is what
right.
realtors use.
So everything past this interest rate data, that's specific to Portsmouth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm fine. I just want to make sure I was interpreting it
Sorry,
correctly.
I probably could have made that a little clearer.
No, you're good. You're good.
All right, so we got the median residential sales price. As you can see, back in 2012, we were extremely low at 127,000, and each year we've kind of just been ticking up slowly, and then hit 2018, 2019, you saw approximately 10%. 2019, 2020, almost 12%. 2021, 20 to 21, almost 12%. Then it was, I think, a little over 13 last year, and we're still pretty strong given everything that's going on in the market today. It's a little over 8%, almost 9%. And it was jumped up, and these are Portsmouth specific, and these are from our records based on valid sales. And that's $265,000 is the median sales price of a home in Portsmouth right now. And then this here is a comparison of the median home prices in the surrounding cities. And you can see we've caught up. We used to be the lowest all around, but we're still the lowest, but not by much anymore. Because you got to throw out Suffolk, Virginia Beach, and Chesapeake. That's apples and oranges. They have mostly new housing stock and higher value homes, where Norfolk, Hampton, and Newport News are similar to us with older housing stock, smaller homes. There's not a lot of mega mansions floating around. And we've caught up. We're slightly behind Hampton now. We're still pretty good number, but they're amount behind Norfolk, and we're catching up with Newport News. And then the percent increase for the median year over year is we're still the lowest. We're catching up quick, and we're still the highest percent change from year to year, because Suffolk actually saw a slight decline. And then the next few are just the neighborhoods and what happened in each individual neighborhood. Unless you have a specific neighborhood you'd like to speak to, I'm just going to go through those and get to the bar chart I have here that shows how the properties break down in the different levels of increase. We had 149 properties that had a slight decrease in value. A lot of those were land values that got adjusted. There was slightly over 2,000 that had no change. And then a minimal change, we had 7,000. Between 3 and 5, 2,300. The big change was roughly in the 5 to 10% range. We saw around 16,000 properties change in that price range. We had a few from the 10 to 15, and then a few that were greater than 15, and kind of, as with the decrease, a lot of those were some land values that were erroneously caught up in last year, and some of the things we had going on that had dropped by and not caught in the review process, so they had to be brought back into equity with the balance of the neighborhoods. Along with just some neighborhoods, we had tremendous amounts of sales. We've had neighborhoods with 10, 15, 20 sales, and that's a pretty strong indicator that you have to make a change. If you got 1 sale, 2 sales, you're not going to push them 8, 10, 12%. You've got 15, 20 sales in a neighborhood, and they're indicating that kind of value change. You really have to change it. You can't just idly sit there and stare at something that when everybody else is at 97%, that are at 85, 84%, they need to go up. So, and then I broke down the commercial by property class, because residential is done by neighborhood. Commercial, to be done properly, is done by property class and not by neighborhood. And we went through, and commercial is, as most of you know, is very difficult to appraise. It's not as quick and easy as a residential neighborhood to do, so we kind of focused where we saw the most need. This year was industrial, last year was multifamily. So we spent Mr. Hines, our commercial appraiser, and myself spent the last 3 to 4 months pulling sales from the city and regionally and reviewing and making phone calls, reaching out to brokers or owners and trying to review everything, get all the information we could on the industrial properties to make sure we had the data correct before we went in and started implementing changes. We've had quite a few large increases in the industrial sector, which is the strongest sector in this city right now, given the port and all the transportation we've got going on with tractor trailers and trains and warehouses, and we still have a shortage of a need for a lot of, especially refrigerated warehouses. And let's see. And just as a visual, this pie chart shows you have, when you do commercial, there's general commercial, multifamily, and industrial. General commercial is your shopping centers, your fast food restaurants, auto service, auto dealerships, things like that. And they account for 50% of the total commercial properties in the city. Multifamily, your apartments, that's 28%. And industrial basically is warehouses, distribution centers, manufacturing facilities, and things like that are using. They account for about 22% of the total commercial properties in the city. And this next slide shows how the value breakdown is for each in the category for the overall commercial. You're looking at just general commercial accounts for $1.48 billion. Industrial is up to $654 million, and then multifamily is at $807 million. And then I did the same thing on this, where we have the breakdown of a few that decreased, which a lot of those decreases happen with when you're looking at apartments, the rent growth and the cap rates drive the market or the value on those, and some of the rent growth wasn't as high as the cap rate change was, so that resulted in some minor decreases in a few apartment buildings. Most of the rent growth was high enough that the expansion in the cap rate was able to kind of keep them in the no change or slightly higher or a slight increase. And then I think we had, if you look at the 10 to 15 and 15 above, that is generally going to be most of your industrial this year. The industrial saw quite a bit of activity, so we were able to really dial that in. And then, as a summary, we have, just for everyone to know, we have, for taxable parcels and residential, we have 32,479 spread out over 191 neighborhoods. And taxable commercial, we have 2,474 commercial properties in 7 districts or neighborhoods. And then the overall for residential, which is the biggest chunk of the city, is we had a slight decrease of 0.46%. You had a 0.46% of the properties decreased. 92.87% of the residential properties increased in value, and 6.67% of the properties had no change. We didn't have enough data to determine, or the sales indicated that we were where we needed to be, which gives the residential properties an aggregate increase of 6.6%, and the commercial properties an aggregate increase of 3.5%. And this is the proposed land book totals versus last year's final land book totals, which shows that the overall increase in the city was 5.7%, which equates to $567.2 million, or if we go with the same $1.30 with the 5-cent tax credit, an additional $7 million, almost $7.1 million in taxes. And then we get to some additional funding that the city receives, which is from the State Corporation Commission and the Department of Taxation, and they do pipelines, railroads, and utility companies. They're typically, we get their numbers late September, early October, and this past year we just received them in, I believe, early October, and they showed for the railroads, pipelines, and utility companies that they assessed those at $135,638,574. That's not something our office does. This is done strictly by the state, which generated $1.69 million in additional taxes. And also the Department of Taxation does the rolling stock railroads, and they base that on the linear footage of railroad tracks within the city and generate a tax that they send to us. And for that, it was an additional $45,000. Now we get into some of the non-taxable things. We have the biggest, right now we have the Disabled Veterans Program, which is administered by the Commissioner of Revenue. As of February 8th, there were 890 recipients with a total assessed value of $251,928,500 and annual exonerations of $3,101,605. And again, that's through the Commissioner of Revenue's department, and so we just assist them in that process of getting the paperwork down to the treasurer. And then there's the Senior Citizen Tax Relief and Tax Freeze, which is done through the Department of Social Services and sent directly to the treasurer. We don't see any of that. We don't know who's in it and who's not, but those are generally a little more steady numbers than they or more consistent numbers. But as of now, that accounts for tax relief $123,955,760 and annual exonerations of $1,249,522, and for the tax freeze, it's $58,736,600 with annual exonerations of $161,874. And then the additional non-taxable properties, not counting the ones I just discussed, these are the ones that are done by classification and designation. So that's just how they are separated in the city. We've kind of usually hung around 40%. This year we're 64 and 36. So we're making some ground. But they're in the next chart, and the biggest one you'll see is the U.S. government. And our office does not assess those. They tell us what the shipyard's worth. They tell us what the Coast Guard base is worth. We don't have the clearance to get on there and actually see what's going on, so they have to tell us what it is. So, and then there's local government, which is the city, regional, which is the other cities who might have property within our city, the state, the hospital, charitable, educational, and just miscellaneous others who are done throughout the city who apply and receive the exemption. And then, as of now, we plan to mail our notices on or around March 8th. We'll have informal hearings set up from March 18th to March 29th during set hours to make sure that the appraisers are in the building. We'll take a break in the middle for lunch that we won't be seeing people so everybody can get their lunch break. But basically from early morning to lunchtime and then right after lunch to closing time, they'll be set in their desk waiting for your phone call or you to walk in and talk to them. And then if you're not happy with that appeal, the Board of Equalization will be accepting applications through April 19th. And for those that don't know, the Board of Equalization is 3 citizens that are no affiliation with our office. They're appointed through the board's process and sworn in by the courts. And then, but they'll have several meetings. We're supposed to meet with them in the next couple of weeks to set up all their meetings and times. So once we get those, we'll have those posted on our website. And then while all this is going on, the staff will continue to be out and about processing new construction, alterations, and working on the sales study audits for the 4th quarter. And then once we get everything cleaned up and are done with the board and have reconciled all our permits and audits through the end of June, we will be processing the land book, and that will be set effective July 1st, 2024. And the rest, as they say, we're ready for the questions.
Well, Mr. Edwards, let me just say that was very comprehensive, and thank you for the delivery. Councilman Moody, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, and yes, I echo that. Very nice presentation, easy to understand. I do have a question on your commercial valuations. What method of valuation did you use?
Depends on the property class. Like multifamily apartments, we use income approach. Shopping centers, office buildings, they're done on income approach. You've got different class, or the industrial can be done on or can be done with income, but this year we did it based on sales because we put so much emphasis in the land. So we did that on cost approach with the land adjustment to get those right. And we send out, I think we sent out about 1,800 requests for income and expense, and we get back about 1%. So I don't believe we got any back for industrial to even know what the market rents were outside of what we can get from paid services. And so when we do get those, they would generally be done on income because we would build models based on that.
Well, and that brings me to my next question. On the commercial, I think the increase was like 3%, 3-something.
Mm-hmm.
So you only get, if you're basing the valuation on income and you only get 1% back, what's the next step to get it? If we don't do anything with it, if I own a business has got good income, I just won't respond to you.
Yeah.
So what's the next step?
What I do is when I get the ones I do get back, I build models. Like say, if just apartments are easy for me to discuss because I just did those. But we have the apartments. We break them down to A, B, and C grade, and we'll get. And I got like, I think we have 6 A grade apartments in the city. I got 4 I&Es back on those. That was the easy one. Build a model. And then B and C, you had to do a little more work. But what I do is I take that, they give me a rent roll, so I see what the rents are. So now I build a model knowing that 1 bedroom's rent for X, 2 bedrooms rent for Y, 3 rent for Z. I put those in a model. I go through and I calculate all their expenses, and I see that, okay, this one has an expense ratio of 48%, this one has 42%, this one has 45%, this one has 60. They're a little out of there, but these 3 are pretty consistent. We'll kind of try and tighten them down and get an expense ratio, and then we build our model. We multiply the number of units by the rent, and then we get a market-derived vacancy, and then add back any other income, and then take the expense ratio from it. We get the NOI, and then we get the market, or some of them, like I had a couple sales, I was able to actually pull the cap rate off of, so I know what the cap rate should be. And then we multiply that, or divide that number by the cap rate, and that gives us the value. For, if, say, your business, you didn't send it, and maybe didn't send it because you had a banner year and you didn't want me to know, so you might end up being slightly lower than you should because the market's telling me that you should be renting for $2,000, but you're actually renting your building for $3,000. So you probably did want me to know. But if you're renting it for $1,000 and I'm telling you my model's telling me $2,000, you're going to send me your stuff at appeal time.
I can see on apartments that rents are published, so you can
Yeah.
build that model pretty
Yeah,
easily.
yeah, and that was the other thing I did. I went through and I sat there in Google and just kind of pulled up any rents
Yeah.
I could and tried to get those rents as good as I could for the overall market. You can go to, like, we have a subscription service called CoStar. You can go there and you can try to pull up any properties around. Some of them, it has information. Theirs is not always up to date. Some of them, you know, when they can get it, it's there, but if it's a hard time for them to get it, they don't really try, so to speak. I mean, they do the best they can, but when some people hang up on you, just like when we call to get them, you know, sometimes they'll tell us, sometimes they won't.
Can't you send appraisers out to visit the businesses?
Yes, we have actually, our commercial appraiser, Mr. Hines, he spent some time bouncing around trying to get the information, and like, it's the same thing, as he may walk in, talk to you, and a lot of times he gets told, well, the owner's not here, can I get your card? They'll call you back, and then we never hear back. He shows up again, he's still not here, but we'll have him call you. He's got your stuff, and then, I think occasionally they'll call, sometimes they don't.
Right. You know, Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, they don't get that luxury or blowing you off. You know, they get a bill in the mail, and they have to pay it. So what other leverage do we have, legal leverage do we have to ensure that the commercial segment is responding to your letter request for income statement?
We can send it, they don't, the penalty for them not sending it in is if we don't get it by the time we do informal appeals, they cannot use it if they decide to take us to court. That's their penalty. But we try, but again, you know, we have limited staff, we can do what we can do. There are other services I've spoken about before, like a service called TREP that does have a lot more financial information that's available that we can, and we've worked with them on some properties. They were just nice enough to give us some data for, I would say free. I know their end game is to sign us up, but at the end they give us some data that we could use, and we've used that on a couple properties in the city that didn't want to cooperate. So.
Well, I would suggest that we use every resource available to make sure that they're paying their fair share.
And that's
If
part of my long-term plan is as soon as we get done with appeals, the commercial team, we've already talked about it, we're getting a game plan, and we're going to start attacking one property class at a time, showing up at every building, knocking on every door, making contact with someone, trying to get the right person to get the contact information for. If there's the general manager or the owner, whoever has the information we need, they're going to leave cards and keep going back, and we're going to try. And then other than that, if we get somebody else's information, if it results in a very large increase, then, well, you're going to get it until you prove it's not.
Well, it'd be good to see what the plan's going to be to increase that 1% response to a more respectable
I think-
percentage.
Yeah, 'cause I think we got-
Right now, I think in a large part, the commercial or the residential's carrying the commercial on their back.
Yeah, I would I'd say.
And it's a lot more that the commercial can do to blow your department off than homeowners, once again, don't have that luxury.
And we've, I know Mr. Hines visited a lot of industrial properties this year, so he made a lot of good contacts that we'll have for the future. So that's one good thing that came out of all the visits, and I'm hoping when we get him out on the street again, that he can make a lot. He's a very personable guy, and for some reason, they all like him. So they're
Well,
willing to talk to him.
How many counterparts do we have? How many commercial appraisers do we have out in the field?
Right now, Mr. Hines is our one and only, and we have another young lady who's helping him, and I have a part-time residential that's going to become full-time. As soon as he does, she's going straight to commercial to help him, so then we'll be at the 2.
Well, I would like to see that increase. I think we've discussed that in the past, but I just get tired of the residential carrying the commercial.
And if you look at it, it's 75-25 split on parcel count, and if you look at the value, it's kind of the same way, but
Right.
but residential went up almost 400,000 total. Commercial went up, 400 million, and commercial went up 100 million. So yeah, it's there's more out there to get. We just have to have the time and resources to get it, but we're on it.
Thanks.
Vice Mayor Lucas Burke, ma'am, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Edwards, for the comprehensive report. You've done a great job, and this is a little over 30 days producing this information for us, and we appreciate the information you've provided. In looking at the market data, I understand foreclosures and homes sold and residential sales price, but just help me to understand transfers year over year.
Oh, transfers, that's just the total number of sales and or just transfers in general, like if you gifted the property to your one of your children or something, and that's considered a transfer. Anything where the title changes is considered a transfer.
Okay,
Not all transfers are sales, but all sales are transfers.
Okay, great. And then under the reassessment, percentages changed by commercial property class on page 19. I put a little dot by some of them that are there, looking at the highest one being in the industrial distribution, and you mentioned that's our ports and some of those entities that we're dealing with, and that's high. Next one being our bulk storage plant, and then factories and auto dealerships listed there next. So are we on a good trend is what I'm getting at with our commercial property?
The industrial was all done like that, and the auto dealerships, we technically have 0 auto dealerships,
Yeah.
but we technically have 3,
Okay.
or actually 4, because Toyota splits. The front part of it's Chesapeake, the back part's Portsmouth.
Okay.
Then you got the Chevy, which is same thing, front part Chesapeake, the back part's Portsmouth, and there's a Hyundai there that's same thing, and then the Honda dealership. So we've made inroads with Chesapeake. We've talked to their commercial team, and we've worked together with them, and we've gotten together. We've met out there. We resketched all the buildings, got them sketched, and we've got together and valued them as a whole, and then we allocate back the percentage of the building that's in Portsmouth, the percentage that's in Chesapeake, and that's not how it had been done in the past.
Right.
And it generated a little bit more money than had been done in the past.
Okay, well, that's definitely
Because
appreciated.
in the past,
It
it
is-
was just the back, it was the garage part, and they just kind of valued it as a garage, but in the end of the day, without the garage, you don't have the front part of the dealerships.
Right, yeah. So, and we've seen a high number with the storage plants because we voted for a few coming forth here in the city. But what is concerning is that it's 0 for the condo, residential, over commercial, and I guess that's
And in some-
pitched to some of our developers who are looking to develop properties here in the city
And-
that they might consider condos, since that's one commercial deal that we're lacking in.
And yeah, I think and it's kind of misleading because there's, I think, maybe 4.
Okay.
So, I mean, so it's kind of hard to determine when you look at it. And I think of the 4, one of them sold, and we were right on the money, so.
Right, okay. Well, I appreciate the information, and I'm sure our citizens do as well. So thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation.
Councilman Hugel, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Edwards, this is a really well-done brief. I'm going to pile on to the question that the Vice Mayor was asking. So regarding industrial commercial property, the increase 25 to 30%, is that the result of new industry being added into our land book, or is that the result of we looked at it before and now we've come back and looked at it and the difference between before and now is 25 or 30% higher?
The second case.
Okay.
It's mostly been there. The average, the low-end industrial property sale was at 175,000 an acre. We were, on ours, we were around anywhere between 100 and 125.
Okay, so I got it that you focused on industrial and we found this big assessment value difference. Would you suspect that there's a similar assessment value difference in the rest of commercial and you just haven't got to it yet, or have you not seen that except in industrial?
We haven't, when looking at the sales, that's kind of what was pushing me last year.
Yeah.
When I first got here, we were multifamily, we had lots of sales and our ratio was 60 or less. So I focused on that and tried to get those in line, because last year it was just myself and Mr. Doris were the only two in there that I could really do commercial. This year we have a commercial team, which is helpful. So we looked at the sales data we had, and industrial was lacking. So I directed Mr. Hines to really look into industrial. And like I said, we looked at the other sales, and there was a couple other categories that we kind of got into. The auto dealerships, even though they didn't sell, they were just sticking out like a sore thumb when I was just looking through. So we kind of did that. And then some of the other ones I've looked at, looking at the sales, they're maybe in the low 90s, which for commercial is pretty good, because commercial is one of the hardest to gauge what it's really worth.
Okay, so I'll go in a different direction now. And this may be something you need to follow up with. I'm interested to understand what the value of our vacant property is. So just empty land. And then understanding if that empty land ended up with a building on it, how much more valuable would it be? And I'm interested in understanding that, because we're all the time talking about trying to bring business in here, and I want to understand kind of the potential.
Well, in theory, if you have this lot here that's got a warehouse on it, and this 5 acres, this 5-acre vacant lot sitting beside it on the same road with no warehouse but cleared and ready to go, land's the same.
I understand the land's the same. I'm trying to understand, for all the vacant property that we have around the city, if we attracted somebody to build on that land, how much more would we have in our land book? So we can talk about that offline, but I just wanted to set that up.
All right.
So the other point I want to make, and this isn't a question for you, this is really a point I want to make to my colleagues. So on slide 30, which is the non-taxable property type, so I asked the city attorney a while back to take a look at whether we were eligible for payment in lieu of taxes. She came back with a memo to all of us and explained where we stand on our eligibility for one form of payment in lieu of taxes. Turns out there are 17 other forms of payment in lieu of taxes, and most of them we're not eligible for. Some of them we might be, but I guess my point is, if you look at the $4.2 billion of U.S. government property, and you multiply that by our proposed tax rate in this budget, that would be $51 million of tax revenue that we're not going to collect. And so we're getting ready to go to Washington in 2 weeks. And so it seems to me that we need to get together before we make that trip and figure out what's the message that we want to deliver to Congressman Scott's office and our senators' offices around payment in lieu of taxes, because I'm not expecting that anybody's going to fork over $51 million in payment in lieu of taxes. But even if we put this number in front of them and tell them, heck, we'll take 20%, that would allow us to lower our tax rate by 10 or 20 cents from where we are right now. And so I think it's worth us figuring out how we want to message that, and then kind of go together when we go to the Hill and deliver that message. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Davis, thank you for the presentation. Back in December, we received an overview from the assessor, interim assessor, and it mentioned about 450 commercial building permits that are outstanding. Where are we on trying to tackle that?
We have been through and reviewed all of those. Some had actually, we found, had been picked up in the past and just not logged off in the system, so they were back in the pile, so it was redundant work. Some of it was stuff that really didn't matter, like signs. We don't pick up signs, there's no value in that. I mean, there's a value in it, but not for our purposes. And then other ones where we've picked up what we could out of them, but a lot of them had previously been picked up and just never logged off in the system.
Oh, okay.
So we had tons of them, but after sitting through and actually when we got done looking at them, we sat down and we're looking at them going, well, actually, that's probably right. Looks like it's already there. They just didn't log off or.
Oh, okay.
couple
So they
of them,
weren't
and-
450 that were
Yeah, so,
waiting,
yeah,
it was
some-
just hadn't been
yeah,
put in
so
the
it was-
system.
Yeah, they were
Okay.
there. There was, because when
Yeah.
the commercial office you walked in, it was about that tall.
Yeah, because it was saying to be audited.
Yeah,
And-
we've been through. I mean,
Yeah.
he was hustling. Because I mean, some of them, and you say, you're looking at it, one property may have 30, 40 permits on it. So
Mm-hmm.
when you say 450, it's not 450 properties worth of permits. I mean,
Right.
they could literally be maybe 45, 50 properties, and that covers that whole stack of permits because
Okay.
you get permits for every part of it you do. So.
Right, okay. And also, as far as your report, I didn't see abatements. And is there any indication of how much the city is foregoing on abatements? And if you don't have it, you can report it back.
No, the only ones I had were this slide here.
So these are the abatements that you have, but there are other abatements.
These
that-
are ones that are just programs we don't administer, so we don't. I mean, I had to get IT, which has been wonderful, in helping me generate reports, and this is a report I got them to generate. But yeah, these
Okay.
are. numbers from that.
So when we get a listing of all the abatements, they should fit into one of these three categories?
Well, not always. I mean, if somebody takes out a permit to demo a house,
Okay.
then they will be issued, and we'll adjust the assessment, and then when we send that down, the taxes get adjusted in the treasurer's office, which generates the abatement.
Okay. Can we get the additional abatements other than these three categories that you have? Can you report that back to council?
I'll have to look into that and see what IT can run for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
I can't guarantee anything because I don't know what they can and can't run, but I can't speak for them, but I will definitely ask.
Okay. And then the last issue, since it's budget, as far as the your staffing needs, are there any other, I know you mentioned, I believe, commercial. Are there any other staffing needs or software needs that council needs to be aware of?
As of right now, I would like the team we have right now is like a family. Everyone is just going as hard as they can for each other, and it's very rare to find, but it's nice that if somebody stumbles, somebody picks up and runs. So it's been working out great. So the staff, I think right now, I'd shudder to bring anybody in right now, just even though we need them. I'm scared it'll mess up the chemistry we have, because the chemistry we have is great. But as far as software needs, Miss Morgan, my deputy, has been working with Vision almost daily. We're coming into the final stages of data migration and checking and verifying and everything. So hopefully within the next month or two, we're going to start transitioning slowly, and then by July, hopefully we're just totally in that and nothing else. And then that company TREP that I'd spoke of a couple times that provides financial data, that'd be probably the next biggest need we're going to have for getting that commercial data that we have a hard time getting.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. So just as a follow-up to Councilman Wicker's question, I understand from talking to city manager that you and she have been sitting down together and talking your way through the staffing support that you need, people that are temporary that you're going to turn into permanent folks, the contract support that you need for CAMA and that other consulting thing that you mentioned, TREP, or she says you guys have done the mind meld. I just want to hear from you. You're happy that what you've submitted for next year's budget is on track.
Yeah, we had a discussion about taking the 2 part-time people I have and getting them full-time.
Yep.
Did we talk about trail? I don't, there was so much going on that night.
Well, I guess to his point, to Councilman Hugo's point, I think he just wants to hear from you that we're working together
yes,
on
yes,
your
we're-
current budget and your next
she's
year's
been-
budget.
Yes, and we've had great communication and trying to get everything going in the correct direction and getting what we need to get us on the right track for sure.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce, I think we want you to ask for the resources that you need to do your job. And so now's the time. Make sure that you and the manager have done the mind meld on what you need so that we're not revisiting in the middle of next fiscal year when you figure out, gee, I should ask for this and I should ask for that. And I mean, it still could happen because stuff happens, but we really need your best guess asking now for what you need.
I'll definitely put some thought into everything I'm going to need in the next couple of days and get back with Ms. Terry.
Thank you.
Dr. Whitaker, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, there was one more issue on page 26. On page 26 of your report, based on your proposed July 1st, 2024, that we see there of the 10.5 million. That increase, you're saying, represents a 5.7% increase from 23. All right. Now, when I look at this and the citizens look at this and anyone who sees it, you will see from the residential in 2023 that it was 7.1 million, and it's going up to 7.5 million. Okay. There was a significant public outcry over value issues. And there was supposed to have been a recouping or reassessing. From what this is showing is that you're in line with the values that had been submitted previously. Also, on the commercial side, it's showing almost a $100 million increase. And so I just want to, the data speaking for itself, that the values did increase and is consistent with what you're reporting.
Yes, we saw a pretty generalized increase throughout, but some neighborhood, you'll see a lot of neighborhoods, and as you saw from that one slide, it's right there. The majority of the neighborhoods and properties in general fell in that 5.1 to 10% range. And all this is generated from sales from those particular neighborhoods. It's not like we just blanketed the city. We
Right.
did neighborhood by neighborhood based on sales.
Right.
So these are generated from the actual sales from those particular neighborhoods. And I know people say, I like to have negative thoughts about Portsmouth and say things in the news and everything else, but at the end of the day, the real estate market says something totally different.
Yeah, well, and the data shows something totally different too, and that's why I was asking you about your market figures, because a lot of times we get in the media, and I have a pretty good feeling why, but the way it's portrayed is really a distraction as to what's really happening economically, because when I look at data like houses on the market for just 17 days being sold, you got 3,653 transfers. When I see that the median house sale, it's 265,000, and that has increased. and we try to put out this story of the danger of Portsmouth. I keep telling people that's a distraction, that while we're talking about and how the media is portraying it, the land is selling. And so I think that this shows a true depiction of what is happening economically that counters a lot of how the media is portraying this majority African-American city. And I believe that this data supports that of all that's being said, the land is still being sold and transferred, which shows there's value. And so I want to thank you, and I hope that those who read this report will see the significance of it.
Thank you. And I did want to say, because I know you guys get a lot of calls before we do, please just send them on to us. We're ready for them. We have the data. We can walk them through it. If they're not happy with the appraiser they speak to, my door is always open. I'm there. They can come speak to me anytime. I'll never turn anyone down when they come in. If they don't want to talk to the appraiser at all and they just want me, that's fine. I'll have to go to the appraiser and get the data, but we'll still.
I thank you for your thoroughness of your presentation.
And Mr. Edwards, thank you again, but I have two questions.
Oh, sure.
One, the three programs that we have in place, I wanted to know, do the other localities have those similar abatement programs in place, like the Disabled Veterans Program, Senior Citizens Tax Relief, and the Senior Citizen Tax Freeze? Is that
I believe
across
so.
the board with all the other localities?
Yeah, I believe so. Everywhere I've worked has had it.
Okay, very good. And the last thing I wanted to mention, it's not a question for you. Vice Mayor Lucas Burke and I met with Congressman Scott and his staff, and I wanted to respond to you after we shared the information about the memo that the city attorney sent us about the pilot and talked about the Department of the Interior. If you're in those programs and Department of Defense doesn't currently have any, his staff, his legislative staff was there as well. So that is a good segue. We can certainly, as we go forward, we didn't get real in depth, but we did start the conversation, Vice Mayor and I, when we were in the room. So we'll follow up with that. And thank you again, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you.
Great job. To you and your staff. Also, Madam City Attorney, ma'am, you have some comments you'd like to make.
Yes, I just wanted to also reiterate that the National League of Cities has a federal advocacy committee that helps in these matters. They were very instrumental in our development of the research that was provided to you. A lot of the programming that you had mentioned, Councilman Hugel's no longer available. The two that are available, the schools receive one and we receive the other, but we're not eligible because we don't have enough acreage. And so focusing on changing some of the requirements is probably the best course of action when you meet with these people. Thank you.
And that concludes our work session items. Madam Interim City Manager, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. For the city manager summary, CMR 24-52, $563,204 from the City Engineering Department, Installation and Resilience Grant for the purpose of studying flooding in corridors. 24-53, $2,000 from Fire. This is a donation in the amount of $2,000 from Ms. Betty Gard. 24-54, $315,000 from City Engineers Department to accept the Safe Streets for All grant funding for the development of the Portsmouth Safe Streets and Roads. 24-55, $850,000 from Department of Social Services for the transfer of funds to CSA budget in the amount, I already said it. 24-56, $1,800 from the Department of Social Services for said funds for Family Partnership Meeting Incentive Program. 23-54, is that 23? Is 23? $5,000 from Department of Social Services for Family Preservation and Support Program to provide short-term support for families and children in crisis. 24-58, City Engineering, adoption of a resolution for request for street additions and deletions for municipal assistance. That concludes my portion.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any council liaison reports at this time? Seeing none, we do have a need to go into a closed session. And Madam Vice Mayor, would you please read the closed session motion?
Yes. I move to go into a closed meeting, A, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A1, for the purpose of discussing and considering prospective candidates for the position of city manager, and B, pursuant to Virginia Code subsection 2.2-3711A7, for the purpose of consultation with legal counsel and a briefing by staff members pertaining to probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, specifically regarding a vehicle fire on Effingham Street.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have a second?
Second.
I would ask that my colleagues please vote electronically.
This item is adopted 6-0.
We are in closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We do have a need to certify our closed session. So at this time, I'll ask the Vice Mayor if you would please read the recertification.
Thank you. I hereby move that each council member certify that to the best of his or her knowledge, one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting just concluded.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a motion and a second, and I would ask all my colleagues to please vote electronically.
The item is adopted 6-0.
And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a 5-minute break, and we will reconvene at 7:25, our regularly scheduled council meeting. Thank you.